Greetings, stampers and crafters. Welcome to episode or session 5 of Stampin Blends 101. Today's session is about our color lifter. Seems like it would be a pretty simple little thing, wouldn't it? Well, a lot of people are confused about this. Some call it a colored lifter, some call it a colored blender. I even call it both. But the thing about it is, you would think it doesn't really have a purpose. It's kind of like the white crayon. What purpose does that have? Well, it really does have a good purpose. It'll help you fix mistakes. It can do different textures. Let me see what else I've got that I can show. I thought I had some images I could show you, but we'll get to them. But besides fixing mistakes, it can add textures and effects to your images. You can also use it like a watercolor pen, and I'm going to show you that. Now I'm going to go over some basics today that you can do with this. I will also include on this same blog post, about a year ago, I think I did a tutorial on doing different textures to create fur, like on an animal picture or something like that. I will link that also down here on the blog post if you want to look at that. But this can be used for several different things. So let's start with the beginning. Now, I've included for you in the blog post a worksheet, color lifter worksheet. And I just did some simple images. You can use this on your images that are already colored and shaded and so forth. Like this, I just added a little texture on that chair. I'm going to show you how to do that. To save time, because when you're doing some of these techniques or even doing a fix, you want your ink to be dry. So what I did is I already, voila, through the power of video, saved you watch me color a bunch of circles. So all I did is took some different colors. This red is our new sweet sorbet coming out. I think this one here might be our starry sky that's coming out. And then I've just done some browns. Well, the very first thing you're going to use this for, let me move in the camera here, zoom us in a little bit and see if we can get you a little closer to what we're doing here. Alright, so the very first thing you're going to learn is fixing a mistake. The normal concept would be that you think it erases it. But what this marker does is it has no color in it. All that's really in here is the alcohol blending solution that is in your regular markers. And it's also the same stuff I showed you a couple episodes ago that you rejuvenate your markers with. You can rejuvenate your marker with that too, your regular blender. And the idea that it actually erases is not quite correct. What it does is it moves the ink. So to explain that a little better, if I were to take and go outside the line here, okay? I'm just going to go outside the line there a little bit. And what I want to do is I want that to dry. And then I'm going to take my color lifter or blender, whatever you want to call it. Ooh, get the lid off. And now I'm going to start back here and I'm going to push toward our circle, toward our main image, toward the line. Now you really don't want to go too far because see how that spreads out like a normal marker? It does that. So what you want to do is you want to go just to the outside of it, and what it's doing is it's pushing the ink inward. So maybe just go over it a couple times, you know, without going too far in. Let it dry, and then if you have to, do it again. Okay, so basically you're going to the outside of it. You're not even going all the way to your little line there. Okay, see how it's starting to lighten it already? Now, my experience, somebody might be better at it. Sometimes if you're trying to erase some red, it might leave a stain. Like it won't totally move it or lift it. Okay, it'll do a really good job. Like probably won't even notice too much, but so see how that's lifting now? I'm going to let that dry, but I'm going to go over it one more time, let it dry some more. And you just kind of keep doing that. So that is your first way that you're going to use it, and that's to fix your boo-boos if you go out of the line. The second way is textures and effects. You can do that with just the marker itself. Say like you want to do polka dots. You can use either end, and you're simply gonna go over your spot and make little dots, and you'll see it start to lift as it soaks in there. Now this is a really dark color, so it's going to take it a little bit to get it down to the white, but you can see where it's changing the color. So you're basically moving the ink away from that spot. See where it's starting to leave those spots? So you would do that on your image and just kind of go back over them as they dry, and you'll eventually end up with your little polka dot textures. Now on the fur technique, I did use this dotting technique, okay, where I'm dotting on a small image with this marker that creates the fur. So you'll see that there. But see how it's starting to move that ink away and add texture? You can do that. You can create designs. Say like you want to create some stripes. So we're just going to go over that spot, and what it's doing is it's pushing the ink away out of that spot and going to your white, to the white cardstock down below. So after you go over it a couple times, now if you do this with your ink wet, I did notice with your ink wet it might bleed a little more than you want it, so you're not really going to get like a crisp line. See, we're just going to go over that a couple times and let it create those lines. See there? So imagine what you can do. I mean, this is a real light blue, and I simply just did a little hash thing, like I just went the opposite direction. And created the little design. My marker's probably getting dry. I haven't recharged it since we started these classes. Now I'll go back over these little dots up here in this dark blue. And looky there. Create a starry sky. You could make little stars. Just do little tiny crosses or whatever you want to do. So that's another way. Now my favorite thing to do with this is I take my blending solution and I find a little rag. This is like my craft room rag, as you can see. And I'm just going to take a little area of it here. Fluff up that rag texture there. Then I'm going to take just a little bit, if I can get the lid off, a little bit of my blending solution. So I'm going to fluff that up, and I'm going to add just a couple drops of, oops, and I dropped it on my paper. Fluff that up, and then I'm going to touch my image and just hold it for a few seconds, maybe count to 5. And what it's going to do is it's going to give you the texture of that towel. Let me see if I can get that to show up. See how it's leaving the texture of the towel? Come on, camera, focus. See if I can get that to focus. Come on, camera. But see there, you can see it coming through. Now, remember, as it dries, it's going to become bolder. See, look at our little dots there and our lines. That is a real quick, easy way to add texture. You can do it with flowers. It can be fur. It can be stars in the sky. Let's try that on the blue over here and see what it does. Add just a couple dots, fluff up our rag there, set it on our blue. And then remember, it's as it dries, it lightens. Ooh, that would be a really pretty starry sky. So you can take other materials, denim. There's a people use it. It's kind of a cloth that people use when they're doing needlepoint. I don't have a piece of it right now, but that looks really neat when you put a little of this on it and dab it on your image. See where it's changing that to look like a starry sky? I wish I could get my camera to focus on that. Maybe it's the white. But I'm gonna hit that just a couple more times with that rag and see if we can get a starry sky look in there. So I'm just gonna hold it for a couple seconds. You don't need to push down real hard because you want to kind of have the texture of those, of the rag there. Oh, there we go. Now it's coming too. Look at that. There's your starry sky. Come on, focus, camera. I think my camera has trouble with the white and then focusing on the darker color, but I think, let's see if that will focus. See there? There you go. Now you can see the texture there. And then we got the texture where we drew some lines. And then we've got our fur texture there. So there are some ways. Now, there's another way you can use this marker that kind of works. Let me see if I move you into camera here. It kind of works like watercolor. And so you're going to kind of turn your marker into a watercolor marker. What you need is like a block or a piece of acetate or plastic or something. What we're going to do is we're going to take a dark marker. This one is Misty Moonlight. And I'm going to scribble a bunch of color onto this acrylic block. So it's kind of giving me a palette. We got our little palette there. Now we're going to take our blender. We're going to go into our palette, pick up some color. You can see it there on the marker. And then you're going to go right to your paper. So you want to go to your darkest spot first, because as you color, it's going to clear off of the tip. So you can just blend it out. This is really good if you take like a kind of a blue or a gray, and you want to create just like a watercolored gray shadow on something white. So it clears off your marker, see there? So it's not hurting it, so you're just kind of using it as a watercolor. And you want to hit the darkest spot first. And you can use it as a watercolor. It's, to me, doing it this way is kind of like doing tip to tip. So if you took the tip of that same marker, put your blender on it, you're going to get the same thing. Okay, so, but this way you're just kind of creating a little palette of ink and then just blending it out. So that's your other way. You can also do tip to tip to create your watercolor, or you can create a palette and do your coloring. So your marker does a lot more than just a color lifter. It works as a really good white crayon, so to speak. So we still got a little brown here. Let me make sure my marker's cleared off. And I'm going to just go along that one more time. And you see it's starting to lift it away from there. You can barely even see it anymore. So those are things you can do with your color lifter. You can take regular images, flowers, leaves, anything like that, and create designs and effects on your images. So at the end of this whole series, I'm going to give you a bunch of different little worksheets that you can play with. You'll have this one. You have the bow one that we did. I'm also, let me show you, you can also, we've got our bows. Let me see what else I can put in there. I bet I'll probably do a sheet of roses for you. Here we've got our two-tone blending. Here we're using our color lifter to add some texture to our roses. We're also doing, you know, some regular deep blending there and some two-tone blending here. So I'm going to give you several little worksheets that you can play with your markers with. But the best way, stamp your images and go for it. Just make sure when you stamp your images, you're using Memento ink. Memento, a lot of inks, including StazOn, has like alcohol in it. And if it has alcohol, it's going to bleed with these, because these have alcohol. You can use StazOn. I've used it, but it's got to be very, very dry. I mean, like ultimate dry so it doesn't bleed. And you don't want to go over it a lot. Like if you were coloring your roses and going over the line and so on and so forth, eventually StazOn will bleed. So just use Memento ink. There are other inks out there that you can use with your alcohol markers. There's No Line ink. Let me see if I've got one of those. It's by Ink on 3, and they call it fade out ink. But what this does, let me see if I can find a stamp and I'll show you what it does. And you can do no line coloring with it. Let me see if I can grab a stamp set here. This is one of our new ones. So what you can do, okay, this doesn't fit on my block, but I just want to give you an idea of what it does here. So we'll grab this. So this no line ink, you ink up your stamp normally, and then when you stamp it, it kind of looks like a Versamark. Okay, see there? So you can see it just barely. I wish I could get that camera to focus on this white paper, but I think you can see it. Now this ink is what you would use for no line coloring. You would just color normally right over it, you know, so you're doing your blends or whatnot, but it still gives you something to go by. So that is called Ink on 3, and it's called Waterproof Hybrid Fade Out ink, a no line ink. I'll do a little research and make sure I am correct in the different inks, but you know, I've tried several over the years, and I'm just going to say use your Memento Black or your Memento Color here. It's a permanent, you know, ink, and I would say any inks that are, let me see what they call this one. It's more of like a stain, but this is the one I use, and I've never had a problem. All of these were colored with it, no problem. And then you've got your no line coloring ink. You can Ink on 3 as a company. I've had this pad forever. I think you can either find it on Amazon or Ink on 3. But take your little worksheet, practice some of these textures, and maybe some of your images. Have fun. I mean, this was just a cute little plain chair, and I decided I wanted my little kitty to have some kind of a little cushion chair there. So play with your different techniques with it, and then next week, our last session, we're going to try to put together several of the techniques we've learned on one very nice image, which I will give you a sneak peek hint, it will be a rose. I learned if you can color a rose correctly, if you can get the shading right and the highlights and the twists and bumps and shading right on a rose, I think you can do any image. And that's what I used to practice on, was, because you have almost all the characteristics in one image. You can use your colorless marker to add some texture to your rose, or you can two-tone blend, or you can even, do a multicolor. So we will be doing a nice size rose image, and you'll have worksheets to follow along. And like I said, at the end of the course, I am going to include an entire booklet that explains everything we've done in the course. I'm going to include all these little worksheets are going to remain on the blog sites. I'll try to remember on the last session to put all of the worksheets available, the PDFs, on the final course also, so you don't have to go hopping around from blog post to blog post. I'll put a bunch of worksheets that you can play with. I'll have a typed up booklet that explains everything we did, and we'll have sample images of what we did and everything. So it'll all be summed up in one big final. And I hope to see you next week. And go have fun. Play with those markers. Have a happy Stampin' Day and stay safe out there. Thank you. Bye-bye.